So, we started General Studies Mains Test Series 2021 and 2022, which is useful for both the aspirants. So, we are also conducting daily answer writing practice for the GS Mains Test Series students. Daily 3 questions we are providing, and it is getting evaluated immediately on the same day, as well as we are also having weekly test, and this is a weekly test 1, which 2021-2022, the exam which was being conducted on 24th of October Sunday, the test 1, Indian polity. So for that Indian polity, the discussion class is here. The Indian polity questions, I asked 20 questions in the examination, 20 into 12.5, it is 250 marks. So the first question was regarding fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy collectively form the conscience of the constitution, however they are outwardly distinguished from each other. Comment means they are the conscience of the constitution, however they are both are different context. What? The fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. So how the answer should be there? The basics of the fundamental rights. So here you have to do, here the basics of the fundamental rights and DPSP outright in the introduction. What is fundamental rights? What is directive principles of state policy? How the both are related to each other, fundamental rights and DPSP. Then delineate the difference between them. Then discuss how both of them together are important and form the conscience of the constitution. So fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. Fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. First explain about the fundamental rights. They are justiciable, they are negative, they work for political democracy, whereas this work for social and economic democracy. They have moral and political sanctions, directive principles of state policy. They are non-justiciable, they are positive in nature, they are negative in nature. They require legislation for their implementation. They do not require any legislation for their implementation. So the fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, their differences you have to mention. And finally, we have to finally conclude that however they are different, but one thing we need to remember that the both are the bedrock of the Constitution of India. The fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, both are equally important. In that way you have to write an answer for this. This is the first question. And coming to the second question, India and USA are regarded as the world's largest and oldest democracies respectively. Examine the basic tenets on which the following two systems are based upon. So what is the demand of the question is, we have to write about the India and the USA, the administration, the government of the USA and the government of India. India and USA are regarded as the world's largest and the oldest democracies. Examine the basic features on which of the following two systems are based upon, like secularism, federal features, unitary features. So what are the physical features on which both are the same, which are different? For example, India is not federal, USA is 100% federal. So what are the features of India? What are the features of USA? For example, coming to India, independent judiciary, independent audit mechanism, all India services, Schedule 7 of the Constitution, proper division of powers between the center, state and the congruent. So these are. United States of America and India are not only the oldest and the largest democracy in the world, both countries have also been successfully preserving the legacy of the political system that was founded after their independence. Similarities and differences of basic tenets. What are the similarities and differences between both of them? Both USA and India follow the basic tenets of democracy with the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Why? Because we are emphasizing on democracy. Both countries represent a model for a democratic political system that secure the rights of the people and diverse population. So I want to tell you that in this question you have to write the differences, the basic features of USA, the basic features of India, and their differences you have to mention in the form of characteristics. Point wise, you have to mention. This is the second question. Third question which I asked is, what is meant by simultaneous elections? At a time, the state government elections and the central government elections should happen at a time. That form of elections is called as simultaneous elections. Why? Because now this Narendra Modi government is advocating for simultaneous elections. discuss the major issues associated with frequent elections in India. So what? One state, this month elections, next state, next month, another state elections, another 3 months, another state elections. So frequent elections are happening in India. Every time the frequent elections are happening in India. So because of this frequent elections, there is no proper policy, finalization, stabilization in the government. Why? Because the governments are every time thinking about the elections only, they are not bothered about the welfare. They are not thinking about the people's welfare. So, simultaneous elections in one format, it is good only. Simultaneous elections in one way, it is good only. Why? Because it is going to work for the people in the long run. Again, they will think about the elections only at the time of simultaneous. When the elections are conducted, only at the time the elections will be conducted. So, simultaneous elections are having positives and negatives. Simultaneous elections are having positives and negatives. Why? Because sometimes we cannot conduct together. Sometimes some bipolls happens, sometimes someone will die, sometimes the elections will be postponed. So conducting the elections at a point of time is a Herculean task. But however, there is a positives and negatives. So how I will write this answer is, write about the elections in India and the constitutional provision, Article 324 of the Constitution. The largest democracy in the world is India. Elections in India have been the largest electoral exercise since first general elections in 1952. The cultural, the linguistic, religious and ethnic diversity of the country makes this event more complex. The provision related to the elections are in Article 324 to 329. So, the elections are conducted from this article to this article. Mainly Article 324 is responsible for conducting of the elections. Introduction. Then body you have to write. Idea of simultaneous elections. Issues associated with frequent elections. Simultaneous general election to House of People happened and all state legislatures happened. It is not a new idea. It already happened in 1957, 1962, 1967, but in 1968 and 1969 the cycle got disrupted due to premature dissolution of some of the legislative assemblies. Then onwards, from 1970 onwards, the simultaneous elections, conducting of simultaneous elections became impossible. But 1957, 1962 and 1968 we were been having the simultaneous elections, but from 1970 onwards the simultaneous elections came to a standstill. So there is arguments against frequent elections. Frequent elections bring policy making to a standstill. Why? Because I will bother only about elections. Why I will bother about making policy? Why I will bother about people's welfare? High cost of elections. Every time elections, high cost of elections. Instability to provisions for frequent elections. It privileges monetary concerns. Make changes in the model code of conduct. Every time model code of. If this time this elections, model code of conduct. If this state, model code of conduct. This state, model code of conduct. So every time there is a model code of conduct which disrupt the administrative procedures. These are the arguments against frequent elections. But there are positives also, like the election expenditure will come down, the policy paralysis will not happen, the policy implementation will take place. Welcome to Vishnu IAS Academy. We are excited to announce the launch of our new courses. Contact us for registrations and counseling. Hard work never fails. Keep learning. Policy paralysis will not happen. Policy implementation will happen. So in this way we can make an answer. Argument for simultaneous elections, argument against simultaneous elections. Conclusion. One India, one election is an interesting concept, but whether it will we follow or not. Yes, but finally, one India, one election is a very good idea. But the implementation, whether it will happen or not, we have to see, because of its diversity, because of the differences in the political systems of the country. Simultaneous elections. Fourth, governors of state are found to be acting more as agent of central government than representatives of the state government. See, so the same thing has been told by Raj Manar Committee of Tamil Nadu, West Bengal Memorandum, Anandpur Sahib resolution from Punjab, that the governor is acting like an agent of central government but not as an independent constitutional head. So there is a comment from beginning that the governor should act independently, but the governor should not act as the agent of central government. So that is the question about. Role of governors as envisaged by the Constitution of India. Constitution of India envisages governor to be the preserver, protector and defender of the Constitution. Preserver, protector and defender of the Constitution. Under Article 159, the governor of a state has a dual role to play. One is as the constitutional head of the state, as a constitutional head of the state, as well as a link between the center and the state. As a constitutional head of the state, as the agent or representative of the center. We cannot call it as an agent, we can call it as a link between the center and the state, more formal language. We can call him as a link between the center and the state. So he is having two roles. But most often, he is forgetting that he is the constitutional head of the state, he is acting much like an agent of the center, representative of the center. So few latest events as how governor has acted more as an agent of center rather than representative of state. The central government is alleged to use the office of the governor as a weapon to manipulate the politics of the state for political gain. These developments raise serious doubts about the role of governors in accord with sentiments expressed by the Constituent Assembly. Reforms needed. The recommendations of the Sarkaria Commission, the recommendations of the Punch Commission, they asked that the governor should act independently, the governor should work as the constitutional head of the state but not as the agent of the center. So finally we have to conclude, governor's office should be apolitical. Governor should be apolitical, means his role should not be like a political person. The role should be like an apolitical person. He should be far away from all the politics. He should not act as an agent of central government. He should be acting like a constitutional head of the state, which is recommended by the Sarkaria Commission as well as the Punch Commission of. First Center State Commission is called as Sarkaria Commission. Second Center State Commission is called as Sarkaria Commission. Do you agree that fundamental duties have remained mere guidelines without any legislative backing? Justify your answer with suitable examples. Yes. So, fundamental duties are mentioned under the Article 51 Clause A, but it doesn't have any legislative backing. Why? Because fundamental duties are non-justiciable. So the argument is there since 1978 when the 1976 by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, the fundamental duties were being added to the Constitution of India, that it should have a legal backing so that the enforcement of the fundamental duties will be there. If it is not justiciable, then enforcement of the fundamental duties will not be there. Citizens will not take seriously the fundamental duties. If the citizen need to take the fundamental duties seriously, there is a need for legal backing. That is the question all about. That is the question all about. So, 1976, 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act added the part called as Part A, Part 4A of the Constitution. Comment on the ineffectiveness in generating public consciousness, relation between rights and duties in India. Mahatma Gandhi in Hindi Swaraj observed that real rights are a result of performance of duty. Real rights are a result of the performance of duty. Real rights are a result of the when you perform your duty, then you will get the rights. Without performing your duty, you are not entitled to get the right. Mahatma Gandhi itself told. That means the rights and the duties both should go hand in hand. If you perform your duty, then only you will be having the right to do you have the right, you have the legal backing for your right. So the rights and the duties will go hand in hand. Rights and duties are closely related and cannot be separated from one another. For every right, there is a corresponding duty. So the right and the duty both should go hand in hand. You not only have the demand for right, you also have the responsibility of performing your duty. So both should go hand in hand. According to the Harold Lasky, one man's right is also his duty. For example, if the state gives the right to life to a citizen, it also imposes an obligation on him to not to expose his life to dangers as well as to respect the life of others also. You also have the right for your life and liberty. At the same time, you also have the duty to protect the life of others, to think about the life of others. So the right and duties both are going hand in hand. It becomes imperative for the state to maintain balance between the rights and duties of citizens and also take necessary steps to promote fundamental duties among the common citizenry with the support of other pillars of democracy, namely the civil society. namely the civil society. So, there is a relationship between the fundamental rights and the fundamental duties. With examples, I am proving. The next question is, Constitution of India provides for a balance between parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. Parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy, but both will work under the Constitution of India. So, finally, the parliamentary sovereignty and the judicial supremacy both will work for the constitutional principles. Body. First, the issue of parliamentary sovereignty versus judicial supremacy. Subject of heat, debate, balance between parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. Indian Parliament is not supreme as the British Parliament. So, Indian Parliament is not supreme as British. Why? Because in British there is no constitution. British is unwritten constitution. They don't have any written constitution, but India, we have written constitution. In India, we have written constitution. In India, as we have written constitution. In India, as we have written constitution, more than the parliamentary laws, the constitutional laws are very important. So, parliamentary sovereignty is there, but more than the parliamentary sovereignty, the constitutional supremacy is there. With the boundaries peripheral set by the constitution, and there is American policy of judicial review in India. UK Parliament is given immense power. If you remember, UK Parliament has every power. They can do anything except a man, a woman, and a woman, a man. Thus, the power of the Indian Parliament is not unfitted as a British power because it is circumscribed within the four walls of the Constitution. However, the judiciary is supremacy. The judiciary supremacy is there. Judiciary supremacy is there, but judiciary supremacy is only up to the limitation of protection of the constitutional rights. It is a custodian of the Constitution. It is the protector of the Constitution. So, parliamentary sovereignty is there, but within the limits of the Constitution. Judiciary is also acting like the supremacy, but only within the limits of Constitution. What do you understand by quasi-judicial body? How are they different from judicial bodies? Enumerate with examples. Yes. Judicial bodies, which are there in the Constitution of India. Bound by President in common law, CRPC and IPC will be followed with respect to judicial body. Quasi-judicial body, which have its own law, like National Green Tribunal. They are not judicial body. Why? Because the head of the quasi-judicial bodies are administrators, like Green Tribunal, National Green Tribunal, like Central Administrative Tribunal. So, the heads are administrators. The quasi-judicial body heads are administrators. But coming to the judicial body, the heads are judges themselves. So, decisions may create a new law. Decision must be based on conclusions of existing laws. Means like natural law, they will be following the natural law, they have to follow the rule of law. The decision itself will become the law. Interprets as well as enforces law, only enforces law. It will enforces the law. Include judges only, include judges and experts. Follow strict judicial rules of evidence and procedure. Did not follow strict judicial rules of evidence and procedure. This is a very good difference between the judicial body and quasi-judicial body. You can follow this model answer. Assess the effectiveness of the National Human Rights Commission in preventing human rights violations in India. You know, National Human Rights Commission is a statutory body. National Human Rights Commission is a statutory body. It has a function to protect the human rights in India. It has a function to protect the human rights in India. But the big problem is, it doesn't have its own body. Investigative body is absent for NHRC. And its advice is advisory in nature. The suggestions are advisory in nature and not binding on the state government or central government. And they don't have the teeth. They don't have the teeth to give the punishment. Just they will advise, based upon the advice, the central government and state government will be acting accordingly. So because of these provisions, I can tell that NHRC is not that much effective. How much it should be there? So when NHRC is not effective, then obviously human rights protection will be compromised. NHRC doesn't have a mechanism of investigation. It is only recommendation in nature. Large number of grievances go unaddressed because NHRC cannot investigate. NHRC led violation of human rights by the armed forces. They don't have any power with respect to violation of human rights with respect to armed forces. These are the some of the issues under National Human Rights. The provision under the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 allow candidate to contest from 2 seats. This is something which is there in news, which is there in prelims 2021 also. So see, according to the section 33 of Representation of Peoples Act of 1951, one candidate can contest from 2 or more parliamentary seats, 2 or more parliamentary seats. But what happened, it has been misused. It has been misused number of times. How it will be misused? See, I will be contesting from 3 places. I will be winning only 1 place, and 2 other places I will be, if I win, I will withdraw. Then what happened? Again the by-polls will be conducted. Who will, when I resign, the expenditure will be on the government. The expenditure will be on the Election Commission. So because of this provision, there is excess expenditure is happening on Election Commission of India. One candidate can contest from a maximum of 2 constitutions and more. So already there are Atal Bihari Vajpayee contested from 3, Biju Patnaik contested from 4, now Narendra Modi contested from 2, Rahul Gandhi contested from 2. In spite of the flag drawn by the provision, political parties and the central government have mostly supported. The centre in a petition filed challenged the constitutionality of the supported section on account of its providing wider choice to the voters. So when he is contesting from 2 or more positions, the voters will have a wider choice. The voters' choice will increase. Having choice is a fundamental right. Having a choice is a fundamental right. In that way, the government is supporting the removal of section 33 clause 7 of Representation of Peoples Act. But however, the expenditure involved, however, the confusion with respect to the voters is also more with respect to this. So, maximum 2 elections he can contest or not is the question. So, the answer is, if a candidate contested from 2 constituencies and 1 both, then he or she would bear the financial burden of conducting the subsequent by-elections in one of the constituencies. So, this rule need to be done. If he is contesting from 2 seats and if he is winning in the 2 seats, then when he is resigning, then the elections expenditure need to be bared by that person. That type of clauses should come. The person who is so much guaranteed, so much confident, then only he can contest from 2 constituencies. So if we bring this, then number of people contesting from 2 constituencies will be reduced. Under what circumstances can the financial emergency be proclaimed by the President of India? What consequences follow when such a declaration remain in force? Financial emergency. Article 360. Article 360 of the Constitution talks about financial emergency. So what are the conditions for it? The President of India proclaims reduction of salaries. During an emergency, central government becomes all powerful. When mainly the emergency is for what? For the protection of for safeguarding the sovereignty, unity, integrity and security of the country, we have this emergencies. National emergency, state emergency, which is also called as President's rule, as well as in the light of the controversy regarding the use of electronic voting machines, what are the challenges before the Election Commission of India? How can it ensure the trustworthiness of elections too? So, in the past few years, there has been demands from several political parties and civil society to replace EVMs with the ballot papers to conduct a free and fair elections in India. So, the main question is with respect to, in the light of the controversy regarding the use of EVMs, what are the challenges before the Election Commission of India? These all are allegations, but one allegation is true. What is that? See here. Technical upgradation regarding VVPT, as there are many factors that affects its functioning like humidity, temperature. If humidity increases, temperature decreases, then the VVPT, voters verifiable PAT, that its functioning will be varying. All party meeting can be conducted time to time to gain the confidence of EVMs. It should not be monopolized. With respect to the party's approval only, we have to go for electronic voting machines. Lack of trust among political parties. EVMs can be rigged to switch votes between the candidates. Chance is there. Technical glitches in the voter verifiable paper audit trail system has mismatch between the votes cast and the paper trail was alleged in some elections last year. So there are some trust deficit. Mainly with respect to electronic voting machine, there is a trust deficit is there. If we remove this trust deficit, 100% electronic voting machine system is going to be a game changer for the election system in India. Anti-defection law is meant to maintain order and discipline in the party. However, it is also seen to be curbing the legislature right to dissent. You know, I covered all important aspects. I covered almost all important aspects. What are the important aspects? For example, simultaneous elections we discussed. Governor we had a question on this. Ordinance we have a question on this. Simultaneous elections we have, and we have anti-defection law is also. So anti-defection law is a good law. Mainly to work against defectors. To work against defectors. Anti-defection law. To work against defectors. So if I win the elections in this political party and if I jump into another political party after winning, it is called a cheating. So that type of systems need to be stopped. So in 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act was being made and we came up with the anti-defection law. A new schedule is added to the Constitution which is called 10th schedule of the Constitution, anti-defection law. But the problem is, I won the elections, but I have my free will. I won the elections, but I have my own conscience. In anti-defection law is telling that the voting in the parliament or in the state assemblies or in the Rajya Sabha should happen according to the whip of the party. So if I want to dissent any opinion, I cannot dissent any opinion. If I want to work against any policy made by the government, I cannot make it. If I want to act against any policy made by my political party, I cannot make. So there is zero chance left for dissent. There is zero chance left for defectors, which might impact the free will, impact the liberal approach, impact the actual issue of my own concern. So that is the basic issue with. So there are two sections of people who are promoting anti-defection law, who are against anti-defection law. So I mentioned here, the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution had created 10th schedule of the Constitution, mainly for the legislature may be disqualified if he either voluntarily resigned from his party or disobeyed the directives of the party leadership on vote. Does the law impinge on the right of speech, free speech of the legislatures? Does the law sanctions party tyranny in name of party discipline by using this anti-defection law? Positives, but it provides greater stability, it facilitates democratic realignment, it reduces corruption, but mention a way forward. India being a representative democracy, an elected representative should have his constitutional public interest rather than party interest. He should work for parliamentary constituency interest but not for the party interest. So this anti-defection law is forcing the politician to work for the party but not for the constitution, for the constituency as well as constitution also. Why? Because here the party is becoming important rather than the constitution or the constituency. Anti-defection law can make him go other way around in certain scenarios. This can be detrimental to the spirit of democracy. The 170th report 1999 suggested that political parties issue whips only when the government was in danger. Dissent is a needed tool in a democracy that suppresses authoritarian command. So dissent is necessary. Dissent is necessary. Dissent is a necessary tool. Law Commission of India also told about it. So compulsory you have to mention this Law Commission word. Then your answer will become more expert oriented answer. Similarly, Finance Commission is a cornerstone. Finance Commission is a cornerstone. Article 280 of the Constitution. cornerstone of physical federalism. Why? Because the Finance Commission of India under Article 280 of the Constitution will be recommending to the government for devaluation of funds which are collected by the center and which will be distributed between the center and the state. The Finance Commission recommendation is becoming very important advice. Core responsibility of Finance Commission: evaluate the state of finances of the union and the state governments, recommend the sharing of taxes between them, to lay down the principle, determine the determination of these taxes among the states. So, role of Finance Commission: for every 5 years, a Finance Commission will be constituted. Elaborate with regard to the recent constitution of the 15th Finance Commission. So, 15th Finance Commission, mainly 42% increase in devaluation of the funds. Finance Commission facilitates cooperative federalism. Discuss the role of CAG, Comptroller Auditor General of India, envisaged in the Constitution of India. Compare it with the role of CAG in Britain. Indian CAG, British CAG. Indian CAG is post-mortem, but British CAG is not post-mortem. After money has been spent, then the CAG will come in India. But British CAG, before the disbursal of the money, the CAG will give the clearance, then only the money will be disbursed. First, CAG performs the role of auditor only. CAG performs the role of both auditor as well as comptroller, means controller of the money. Audit of the accounts is conducted after expenditure is committed. No money can be withdrawn without the signature of CAG. CAG is not a member of parliament. CAG is a member of the House of the Commons. So, member of the parliament. What is first past the post system? Who is getting maximum votes? For example, 100 votes are there, 4 contestants are there. For example, 2020, 30, 2020, 29, 31. So, 31% is the winner. The person who got 31 is winner. So, 1 vote extra, 1 vote more, he will be the winner. That is called as first past the post system. In a country like India, the first past post system will be very easy because the literacy rate and the empowerment are not up to the levels. Time being, the first past the post system is more recommendable for the country like India. What is first past the post system? Do you think whether there is a need to replace first the past system with a proportional representation or a hybrid model? Yes. Hybrid model means both together, FPTP and PR, proportional representation together. Proportional MLC elections, those are proportional representations. The 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act is a significant event in the evolution of grassroots democratic institutions in our country. Examine in how it has the potential of transforming the representative democracy into a participatory one. Representative democracy into a participative, 73rd Constitutional. Compulsory one question will be there in your GS2 with respect to local self-government. Compulsory there will be one question with respect to local self-government. 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act or 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, their question will be there. So, transforming the representative democracy into a participative. Participative means they are also participating in the governance. Now, I am the representative of the public, but now it is not representative, it is something more which is participatory. They are also participating in the process of governance. Yes. That is a good form of good governance. It is a original form of good governance. Why? Because more than representative, participatory is much important. Local self-government is the management of local affairs by such local bodies who have been elected by the local people. Panchayati Raj institution was constitutionalized through the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992 to build a democracy at the grassroots level and was entrusted with the task of rural development in the grey area is the lack of adequate funds. There is a need to enlarge the domain of panchayats to be able to raise their own funds. The interference of areas of MPs and MLAs in the function of panchayats also adversely affected their performance. The 73rd Amendment only mandated the creation of local self-governments and left the decision to delegate powers, functions and finances to the state. Therein lies the failure of Panchayat Raj institutions. So, more devaluation of power should be given to the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act bodies like Panchayats, Grap Panchayats, urban local bodies. Effective devaluation. Expert committee laid out in detail how to achieve this through the device of activity mapping. Devaluation is necessary for any institution to be innovative and independent. So, more participation need to be done, more down to top, from bottom to top approach need to be there for the sake of more participation of the people in the governance process. B.R. Ambedkar said, normally it should remain as a dead letter in the constitution and would be used only in the last resort. Which one? Emergencies. However, it has become one of the most controversial provisions in the context of Article 356. It should be like a dead letter, means it should not be used frequently. It should not be used frequently. It should be used very rarely. Only as a last resort mechanism. But what is happening? Article 356, President's rule, frequently, according to the whims and fancies of the government of the day, he is using President's rule. In this context, SR Mumbaiya case is very important. 1994 SR Mumbaiya case judgment told when the President's rule can be imposed. What should be the condition for President's rule? What will be the condition for President's rule? President's rule, ground for imposition of President's rule, misuse of President's rule with some examples and conclusion. The spirit of cooperative federalism can be fulfilled if and only if the central government uses this President's rule very rarely. Then only we can go for this. Article 19 is the first casualty in the times of pandemic. Association, expression, profession, residence, movement, Article 19. Analyze structural, procedural and practical factors which may affect the exercise of fundamental rights by citizens in the times of pandemic. COVID question this is. Introduce fundamental rights enshrined in Part 3 of the Constitution, with emphasis on Article 19, write about Article 19, body discuss Article 19, entire range of transformation induced by the pandemic has had a societal impact, repercussions on Article 19. Why? Because no free movement. Free movement is not allowed. Right to movement is not allowed. Livelihood or life itself, Article 19 has undeniably been the first casualty, 100%, because of the COVID. Lockdown restrictions, people's freedom to move, people's freedom to assemble peacefully, as well as to conduct their trade. These are the central freedoms which were being ensured by Article 19, all got violated because of pandemic. Need to secure these fundamental rights. Article 19 along with Article 14 and Article 21 forms what B.R. Ambedkar called the Golden Trinity. Article 14, Article 19, Article 21. These three together is called as Golden Trinity of the Constitution. Golden Trinity of rights. The fundamental rights in Part 3 are certainly under the strain today due to the transformative shifts caused by the global pandemic. Article 14, Article 19, Article 21, these three together are called as Golden Trinity of rights. How far do you think that the provisions of Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019 failed to live up to the expectations of progressive Supreme Court judgments over the years in this regard? Law. Why? Because district collector will be giving the recognition for a transgender. It can be misused. No reservations are provided under this law. That will be a negative effect on them. But however, third gender was been identified. That is a positive thing. So first mention about the provisions of Transgender Act, then mention about the criticism of the Act, the negative points of the Act. NAS foundation, NAL's conclusion. So however, this Act was not that much effective. The final question. Indian Constitution provided for ordinance powers for the executive. Ordinance power for the executive. Ordinance, governor role, president's rule, anti-defection law, new laws, compulsory expected questions for your mains answer writing, for your mains. In this context, by illustrating Supreme Court judgments, analyze the impact of frequent resort to ordinances on various factors of democracy. On various factors of democracy. 1, 2, 3 of the Constitution is ordinance making power by the central government. 213 is ordinance making power of the state government. Ordinance also SR Mumbaiya case as well as Wadhwa case. This case is very important. Challenged Bhagwati ruled that the ordinance making power would be exercised by the executive only when there was an emergency situation arising, then only you have to go for ordinance making power. If not, there is no necessary to go for ordinance making power. So this is about test 1 model answers discussion. And test 2 we are going to have on Sunday. That discussion class will be happening with one of our famous faculty, the geography faculty. We will be having the test. Thank you.